Believe in the God who believes in you. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Is it possible? Pride without arrogance, self esteem without narcissism, self respect without vanity, dignity without conceit, individualism without selfishness. That's it. Sweet, satisfying, self effacing, sacred self esteem. Yes, that's it. That's what he and he alone can offer and deliver with total consumer satisfaction. But you say the entire subject of God is of no concern to you. It's okay for theologians and religious people, but you are far more interested in corporate mergers, personal investment, technological development, businesses, ventures, politics, medical advancement, world peace. Bet a minute, maybe God share your interest in this subject too. If he is for real, the two of you ought to get together, think about it. Or maybe your wife shares your lack of interest in God. Religion, she too is focused on career, advancement, education, aerobics, fashions, children, house, furniture, wedding, birthdays, fingernails. If God believes in us, why don't we believe in Him? I posed this question to Mother Teresa. Distractions. Too many distractions, she answered. Of course, it's not that we don't believe in God, we just have too many other things on our mind. What's the old saying? The wheel that sequel the loudest gets the grease. Distractions, no doubt, that's our problem. Yours too. Believe me, I hear you. I have got mail to sort out junk mail to discard is all mixed in with bills to be paid, invitations to important events I wouldn't want to miss, letter from friends. These things do I have to answer, final notice to resubscribe to my favorite magazine. I wouldn't want to miss an issue, political propaganda, and now and then, rarely perhaps, but you never known when, a letter with a check or a chance to win $1 million. Yes, there's the mail. I absolutely cannot ignore it. They will turn my lights off, and God doesn't. I send me checks or final notice if he is in all of that stuff in the mailbox. I missed it. You probably did. Then there's the telephone. I can't ignore a telephone that's ringing, answering machines. I had them, I love them. Whatever the message come and demand a response. If I ignored them, I'd soon be out of a job, out of the house, or on the outs with friends and family. Then there are distractions. My to-do lists replace the batteries, charge the while charge the aisle in the car, make appointment with the dentist, Watch out for the plague build up. Take the clothes to cleanness. Go grocery shopping. You think I am busy. My friends to do lists are roads than mine. They have got a yard to keep up, weeds to fight, and no time to plant the flowers, or cut them and enjoy them close to the eyes and nose. They blossom and fade never noticed by anyone. They have got kids too and pets busy adds more items to their to-do lists. Take dogs to vet, find dog sitters so we can take a weekend off. App. They take weekends off, more notes on their to-do lists. Check on hotel and airline reservations. Water the plants, give them darn goldfish away. Some of my even have second homes. You should see their to-do lists. Distractions. If I didn't have enough, as it is, something always seems to come along that I didn't count on. It could be a simple things like a hole in my sock, a broken fingernail, a stain on my suit. Why didn't I notice it before I was all dressed and ready to go out? If could be a humdinger of a surprise, the flu or rose, a mysterious lamp, an odd-looking mole, cancer doctor's appointment must be made. When will the test be back, doctor? And what if the tests are positive? Surgery, chemotherapy, how long is sickness? It can be so time consuming. Just staying alive and fit has a way of interfering with real living. Then there are funeral. Even if I don't have to go or don't want to go or simply choose not to go, I still am bothered by the knowledge that someone I knew died. Death can be a real distraction. Especially if you have to plan the funeral, even if it was all planned in advance. There are the announcements, liars, accountants, changing names on the bank's accounts, subscriptions, insurance, policies. Details can drag out for months. I can cry my eyes out, but the business still has to be handled. Speaking of funerals, funny things how easy and harmless it was to cancel those terribly important appointments so I could go to the funeral. Talk about distractions. You have heard about divorce. It's another death. It can add to the to-do list even if there are no children and no ex-in-law. You wouldn't believe it unless you have gone through it. Distractions. I have the vague impression that I am missing out on something, a concert, a game, a hobby. Maybe at times I wonder, am I missing out on this whole thing called God? I am confused. Maybe the atheist is right, maybe not. I haven't time to think about it. I am not even sure if I care or dare to really get into it. I will put it on the back burner, call myself an agnostic. I'll defer daily, postpone. Perhaps your doubts are not based on distractions. You do care, you read, you do have a serious question. Let's have it. What puts the romance in a rose? If you did a biological analysis of a rose, you would study its various parts, thorns, petals, leaves, stems, and root system. You could carefully dissect the plant part by part and have a complete organic description and still not be able to answer the question, what is love? What is romance? If God believes in every person, why doesn't every person believe in God? Distractions, yes. Doubt, yes, but there are other reasons. I can hear someone say to me, you may be interested, doctor, secular, in the God of the Ten Commandments, but frankly, I am more interested in politics. Who needs God when we have good government? The government has an obligation to take care of the people, right? Who needs God if you have got social security, unemployment, insurance, Medicare, welfare checks? Okay, I will admit government subsidies do precious little for my self-respect. The state can actually put a dent in my dignity to tell you the truth. Money, that's the only God I need. I just might win the lottery someday. Maybe it won't do much for my pride, but it will open doors to lot of pleasure. And if I have enough fun, I can escape from life's embarrassment for sure. If I am rich, I want, I have. So, so many distractions. Wrong, you say. Explain that to me. The way I see it, I would hire people to take care of all my to-do lists. List. On the other hand, I don't know if I'd like to have servant around. I like being able to have the house and yard all to myself, not worry about running around from room to room in my shorts or closing the door every time I go to the bathroom. I wouldn't want to have someone else raid the refrigerator for me. I'd miss that. One of the pressure of affluence and wealth, someone once said, is that the richer you are, the more opinions you have, when to travel, what to wear, which house to have in, which invitations to accept. Wealthy people have even more decision to make. Getting rich gives you the doubt, dubious luxury of choosing from among even more distractions. Let's my lawyer and accountant worry about the bills, tax matter, investments. That's what I hire them for. A celebrity once told me. Suddenly sad lines scrawled across her face like the tracks of little invisible worms. And she said, you know, the really message of my business and I paid them to do it. If God believes in you, why don't you believe in him? I ask the question. I get still another answer from another mind's strings and staying out there. The God of the Ten Commandments. I know people who really are into that, but frankly I think that they'd be better off if they learned to stand on their one two feet. If There's a God, I am it. I am my one God. Now that sounds anti-sing seductive. How does it go? You have unlimited potential. You have within your power untapped and unlimited. You are your one. God believe it. I like that for sure. It appeals to my ego. What a kick, what a high. Oh, second thoughts. Why I wonder, would I want to be, or do I think I could be my one God? Don't remind me. It's true. I had an alcoholic friend who was into the big ego trip. He kept on telling himself, you don't need to go to an alcoholics anonymous meeting. You are not an alcoholic. You are not addicted. You can quit anytime. You can handle this challenge all by yourself. You don't need anybody higher power. You don't need it. It's sad. He still a loss. I have to confess that this I am my one God. Stuff come across sort of flaky little gold plated jewelry. The phony veneer wear thin and the cheap reality is exposed. Bang! What a bang when the ego exploded. The God of the Ten Commandments. I don't know. I don't care. I am really not into that. I don't need it. Besides, I have some serious doubt. You know, Mother Teresa, Dr. Secular, I admire her. I'd like to ask her this one question. For sure you have seen it all. How can you believe in a good God when there's so much pain, evil, suffering and tragedy in the world? What? You asked her that. What did she say? Be human, not God. Create the pain and suffering. There's so much selfishness, Dr. Secular. That's what Mother Teresa told me when I asked her that very question. You shall have no other gods. You know, Dr. Secular, maybe this is the root of my problem after all. Probably my ego has caused me to get my values all mixed up. I will admit sometimes I do go upset, frustrated, angry. I even want to cry sometimes. There's sometimes else I want to be treated with respect. I want to know that I am important. Yes, I do have ego, needs. I cannot deny that for sure. I don't like to be embraced. If there is a tug of war inside me between indulging in forbidden pleasure and safeguarding myself from shame, I will try to have it both ways. But oh God, hey, I said that word. I hope I don't get caught. If I really thought I'd be found out, I am sure my fear of shame would be out over my appetite for fun. Sin, I am not really sure. I know what that is. Shame, you bet. I understand that self-respect, self-esteem. I want it. I need it. Why am I this way? Big or little, healthy or sick? Why does everybody seems to have an ego? How important is your self-respect, self-esteem anyway? To understand the depth and breadth of these primeval emotions, first take a look at a English word that casts least lights on the subject. Pride, honor, self-respect, dignity, glory, self-worth. Can anyone live without these self-affirming perceptions, or look all it from the opposite side of the coin? Humiliation, shame, embarrassment, disgrace, dishonor. Can anyone live a healthy emotional life in such a desolate, demanding climate? But isn't pride one of the seven deadly sins, and humility one of the queenly virtues? Are we not winsomely attracted to the beautifully humble person and repulsed by the proud? And if such is the cause, then why do we tolerate and encourage pride in our family, our marriage, our education? The opposite of pride is not humility. The opposite pride is shame. Didn't I read that scientists are on the verge of proving that there is no God? What do they call it? A theory of everything. TOE. Yes, this theory of everything has really made the news. It is the work of Stephen W. Hawking, professor of mathematics at Cambridge University. My proposal, he says, is the statement that the universe is a closed system. We don't need to suppose there is something outside the universe which is not subject to its law. It is the claim that the law of science are sufficient to explain the universe. This theory of everything caused people to stop and question. If law of science can explain everything, then where does God fit in? Hawking's credentials are impressible, impeccable. When he speaks, people listen. They believe him. For those of you who are impressed with Dr. Hawking's observations, I share the rest of the story. Even if we had a TOE, Hawking admits we would still be left with one final question. What is it that breathes fire into the equation and makes a universe for them to describe? And does he have an answer? If I knew that, says Hawking, then I would know everything important. So we are back to the possibility of God, who puts fire not only in equations but in human hearts and soul. Accomplishment, our work isn't it true that we deplore the person who takes no pride in his labor? Are we facing a shattering contradiction, or has our language confused the clarity of our understanding? First, genuine healthy pride and authentic humility are not opposites. They are one and the same, only different sides of the same coin of human value. They will on the way to bright insight into human behavior when we see that what we all call repugnant pride and abhorrent self-interest and nauseating narcissism may actually rise from the absence of that inner security. that only healthy self-esteem best way. Any analysis of sin, selfishness, narcissism, pride, vanity, or egotism that fails to note this is to say the least a surface, shallow, and potentially misleading diagnosis of the real human predicament. We will be helped immensely when we come to understand that I promised to repeat it. It's so important. The opposite of pride is not humility. The opposite of pride is shame. Where did this need for self-esteem come from anyway? Why is every baby born with a force called ego? What is the origin of the universal inclinations to pride? Do the quantum physics folks have an answer to this? Where did this fire of the soul come from? Human beings are creatures designed to breathe the air of healthy, humble pride in our heart of hearts. We sense a spiritual surge for greatness and glory. Of course, why the ego is the marks of the image of God within us. It's so obvious. It is not the product of an evolutionary process. It is the stamp of the Creator in our souls. Every human being that ever lived or lives has a hunger for self-respect. There isn't a single human being anywhere who does not face the possibility of ego problems. Self-respect is important. It is a primal. It is a instinctual. It is an incurable craving. It will never go away unfulfilled. Left raw, this ego will erupt crudely, wildly, wickedly, even viciously. The end result of such untamed pride is shame, unless it is a safely satisfied that hunger for self-esteem will seek fulfillment in neurotic and even dangerous ego trips, all of which will ultimately prove self-defeating by adding up eventually to shame and humiliation. If we placed all of the primates alive and squirming in a row of cage, we would note that one primate stand out from all the rest. One primate is driven by a hunger for self-respect. One primate has dignity. One primate has developed a belief system. One primate dreams, imagines, and professes a belief in God. Why are Homo sapiens the only species living on planet Earth with these instincts and inclinations? How did this biological entity develop these distinctive spiritual qualities? I have posed these questions to philosophers and psychiatrists that I meet frequently. Their reply was, I don't know. I accepted their answer as an honest, humble admission until I heard a lecture by Abraham Kaplan, formerly of the Philosophy Department of the University of Michigan. Dr. Kaplan was given the Adolph Meyer Lecture at the annual meeting of the American Psychiatrists Association in Los Angeles. In his message, he challenged the psychiatrists in attendance. Oftentimes, it seems to me that psychiatrists have a way of saying "I don't know" when actually they are dodging their commitments. Cowardice is disguised as a humility. Humility. You don't wait. You don't want to admit it, but the real truth is that the human being is this way because there is a God and we are reflections of God. Just as surely as the moon is the reflections of the sun, we have always been and will always be incurably religious. God has placed spirituality deep within our soul. We cannot fight it, run away from it, or ignore it. Consequently, we will find a belief system in every culture, in every society, no matter how primitive or how sophisticated. Even atheistic states have unwittingly developed a belief system that is a mixture of scientism, secularism, and statism. The human being will intuitively, instinctively, instinctively, impulsively grouped and grasp a force or a faith or a philosophy that will relieve us of the pain of shame, other escape from the anguish, or a lost sense of self or promise a compensation or fulfillment for low respect. False goals like power or pleasure or false pride make things promise but they don't deliver what we need most. Self-confidence, mellow self-esteem. These phony, fabricated faith and philosophies that we choose as God substitute really leaves us grasping and gasping for self-assurance, self-belief, self-confidence, self-dignity. People who do not have self-confidence will never dare to pursue creative adventure. Then they lack the stimulations that comes from creative thinking. As a result, they miss out on the healthy excitement of constructive activity and may even submit to evil, sin, and immorality. What a potentiality! Demonic ego trip. That's why this command is meant to be number one. Meanwhile, those false gods are always manipulating us by offering counter faith, emotions, egoism instead of self-esteem. And like all counterfeits, this cheap false substitute, which we call vanity or arrogance, will lead the poor soul to an end that spells shame instead of glory. Yes, every person will find and follow some ruling force to integrate his personality. It may be power, politics, pleasures, passions, or pathetic pride. But where will these false gods lead us to abiding self dignity, not just the opposite, isolation, alienation, rejections, and in the end, no respect, no honor, no healthy pride, only disgrace. How sore on the emotional plates is the aftertaste of drinking the bitter elixir offered by the false god. No wonder God mercifully keeps on insisting, you shall have no other god. There is still no substitute for the original, the real things. This God who calls himself the Heavenly Father just won't give up trying to risk us. Look at what the Creator God is doing today. Even godless state, yes, even atheists are switching to a belief in the God who believes in human being. But does it really make a difference if you choose to believe in the God who claims to believe in you? Will this belief system generate a healthy pride that can produce a positive pressure to rise to become a creative, constructive, humble human being? Check the life of Dr. Ben Carson, a leading neurosurgeon. He was trained in the best school in the country, yet he believed that only God can accomplish the ultimate healing that he witnessed at Johns Hopkins University Hospital. Such was the case when Dr. Carson faced one of the greatest challenges of his life to separate 7-month-old Simon's twins joined at the skull. The surgical team practiced the procedures for months because they knew that even a minute could mean the difference between life and death. After 14 hours in the operating room, Dr. Carson said, we did the best we could do, the rest us up to God. In the publicity that followed, Dr. Carson repeatedly pointed to God's role in the successful operations. Ben Carson knew that God can change people and situations not only in the hospital but also in the street. When in the Detroit ghetto, Carson was accustomed to news of a different kind during a fight at age 14. He laughed with a knife at the He lunged with a knife at the stomach of another kid, only to see the knife blade strike the belt buckle and break it. Sacred him. He realized that he needed to turn his life around. He couldn't do it alone. With God's help and the love and support of his mother, he came out of the streets and eventually went to Yale University. Today he is one of the leading pediatric neurosurgeons in the country, and his successful operation on the Simon's twins brought him into the spotlight. You don't have to be a brain surgeon to be important. God can manifest his glory through you if you will stay humble throughout your success. Dr. Ben Carson, in characteristics modesty, says today Dr. Carson is saving lives. He is rebuilding lives through hard work and his talent, but he is quick to point out that he wouldn't have achieved what he had if it hadn't been for people who believe in him, his mother, and God. There can be no doubt or debate something is sadly lacking in a society that replaces God with false God, or tries to run on the energy generated by undisciplined and unregenerated egos. Depressions and despair follow when we are left to make it one on our own. In an unpublished lecture, Martin E. P. Seligman, nationally esteemed research psychologist from the University of Pennsylvania, asked the questions why is there is so much depression today. He studied and reports a dramatic tenfold rise in the depression rate in the last 50 years in America. In a study founded by the National Institute for Mental Health, he contrasts the low level of depression, contrasts the low level of depression among Kululi of New Guinea and the old order Amish of Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, with what he calls California self. By California self, which could more accurately and fairly be called modern international secular self. He means individualism disconnected from the support system in a society, family, or religion. This leads to helplessness, which will lead to hopelessness. By contrast, the Kululi culture calls for people to help their own people, so asking for help is a right and therefore produce no disgrace and is no affront to dignity. The same spirit can be found among the old order Amish. To ask for help and to accept help is not demanding. In fact, without the self-affirming support of families and religions, failures increase, self-esteem is battered, depression spreads. You simply need the emotional support of someone who will believe in you. Everybody needs this kind of support. So now think about this. Is real self-esteem possible until and unless someone believes in you? Perhaps, but it's doubtful. I can't imagine it. What happened to people who never ever had anyone believe in them? They do not learn to love themselves or anyone else. Without a healthy self-love, they are emotionally incapable of giving or receiving love. They feel too unworthy of love to accept love and feel too empty of love to give any away. Then what? Listen to the evening news, visit the persons, prisons, checks the drugs abuse epidemic, studies of antisocial behavior keep coming up with this responsible and recurring diagnosis law self-esteem. What happens to people when they encounter people who don't believe in them and express that lack of belief through indignant and insult indignities. They start what's little ones are big ones are the border in the boardroom, in the bedroom, or on the playground, even on the freeway. What happened to people who meet people who believe in them? Miracles. As we shall see miracles and final challenging questions. Will you dare to believe in the God who believes in you? I have met enough people that are so cynical and so lacking in self-worth that they actually distrust the person who affirms them. So they fail the test of this first commandment. They suspect that God is putting them on or leading them on only to let them down someday. They should, of course, put God to the test. You are already placing your trust in the same God everyone does, whether you realize or not. You are placing trust in yourself, your country, science, ego, money, sex, things, personal power, pleasure, prestige. Does your God really believe in you? Is there a way to test whether your God or whether any person really believes in you? After all, there are a lot of flatterers, and manipulators can be put your gods or my gods to a test. Can you be really sure if someone really believes in you? The answer is yes. Ask these revealing questions. What trust do they put in you? Do they trust you with their money? The God of the Ten Commandments has turned the treasures of creation over the human race to manage, and God trusted you with treasures called intelligence and imaginations and intuitions. Yes, the potential to be a creative person, that's true. And to that his gifts of the capacity to love, the ability to exercise faith. He has trusted you with a treasure called the instinctive inclinations to believe. What freedom do they give you? You can measure the sincerity of people's trust by the amount of freedom they offer. God even gives us the freedom to choose to be believers or atheists. Yes, thus possibility of doubt is a proof of the possibility of faith. For there can be no faith without the freedom to doubt. Yes has no meaning without a no. Talk about trust. So didn't God take an joyful risk here? Of course, but he faced a divine dilemma. He wanted you and every person to discover and develop a sense of divine dignity. Dignity will never emerge without the freedom to make personal decisions. Self-esteem can only evolve through the process of making risky and responsible choices. So the next question will really expose the sincerity and integrity of a person who claims to believe in you. What responsibilities do they give you? Little ones or big ones? Easy ones or impossible ones? Short run responsibilities or responsibilities that carry long term, maybe even eternal consequences? Are they honest with you? Do they admonish you when you need it? Do they affirm you before they finish correcting you? Do they endorse you even if and when they know you could at times be an embarrassment to them? Do they still stand by you in spite of your failures? Finally, do they respect you enough to let you make the big decisions and live with the eternal consequence? Do they keep in touch, check on how you are coming along, approach you at unexpected time and ways, through people or through circumstances, to encourage, affirm, or admonish you? Do they build you up? Are they passing through challenges on to you? Are they letting you face enough problems and pains to grow and mature as a person? Do they have time to listen, respond? Can you contact them anytime, anywhere, and be assured they have an open line for you? Do they share their glory with you? The real God does. God wants to separate His glory around. He expects us to keep on keeping on creating. For as we share in the process of creating, we share in the glory. There is no more glorious feeling than to create something beautiful. Will they make solid commitments to be your friend? Will they run the risks the serious relationships always entails? The true God does. Do they still love you after they've seen you at your roast? God does. Now when anyone believes in you enough to satisfy these 10 list question that called love, apply this test of any trusting relationship to this God of the 10 commandments. He trusts you with treasures. He gives you the freedom to become a unique person. He shares responsibilities that will allow you to grow. He is honest in relating to you. He is available to be in communication with you. He offers real encouragement. He shares with you the credit, honor, and glory of being involved in creative activity. 9. He gets involved in your dreams and your disappointments. 10. He is able and willing to offer grace and forgiveness to anyone. Add them all together and you will know the meaning of a statement so familiar that it may have lost its punch. It is the most powerful collection of three words ever put together. God loves you. Now that's the reason you can go wrong if you will only choose to believe in the God who believes in you. His affirming trust in you offer the solid foundations for a healthy, humble pride. My father never used to say anything. He was the quietest man I know. All through my childhood, my father and my mother had a good marriage, but they had their problems. My mother would get upset at my dad and say, "Why don't you say something? Why don't you talk? What should I say?" He replied, "Just something." My mother would always answer, "Well, when my father died, I will never forget how much my mother missed him." But he never said anything. I said to her one day, "How can you miss him so much?" "Oh," she said, "even when he was silent, I always knew he was there." That's how it is with God. We may not be aware of God's presence, and if we are aware of it, we may not acknowledge it. Nevertheless, He is there, believing in you. He is like the air. You are so accustomed to breathing that you forget how dependent you are on the air until you are in danger of losing it. God is in your corner, encouraging you in silent, subtle way. Trust the God who is always there. Believe in the one who believes in you. He knows how unique and special you are. He understands you as you really are, and He alone can see your full potential. Discover what God already knows about you. That you are a beautiful human being. God cares about you, and He has beautiful plans for your life. He doesn't leave you to flounder about. He has given 10 positive principle prescriptions for living to the fullest. Welcome them into your life today. 10 commands meant to give to you what you need most. God believes in you even if you don't believe in Him. God believes in me even if I don't believe in Him. That's love. Then I must be something special. Then maybe I can start believing in myself too. Now I will begin to believe in the God who keeps reaching out to me with invitations to believe or with unexpected, unsolicited, and unexplainable bursts of inspiration. William Donner was born to Irish parents in a Harlem ghetto. Despite his sober praying mother, he was too and tough and drinking and selling hard cider at age 9. By age 12, he was an alcoholic. As a budding teenager, he worked for the mafia in the numbers racket. By 21, he had survived gunshots from chasing police officers and an ice pick attack from gangsters. At the age of 23, he worked up from a drunken stupor to find himself living on Chicago's Skid Row in a 50-cent a night flop house. The dried blood on his shirt was 3 days old. Black pus was draining from the infection in his ear, which had been badly wounded in a street fight. He had experienced everything life had to offer, and it was a bad deal. For days, weeks, he been living on rubbing alcohol. Tonight, he would end it all. He knows how he did do it. He did simply jump from his sixth floor window of the flop house. He'd be another statistic a dead one. Minutes before midnight, he went out for a last stroll as he crossed that darkened, dangerous street. He saw a solitary figure standing at the lamp post. The stranger in a black suit turned and his white turned around collar reflected the dim light. The priest simply smiled, that's all, and a mood of feeling entered the young man's mind. He was instantly aware of a divine presence. He experienced the presence of God of peace moved into his troubled, tortured soul, and he would never again be the same. There were no someone, no condemnations, only salvation. For the first time in his life, he knows someone believed in him, someone loved him. That someone was God instantly, permanently. The compulsions to drink left him, never to return. Suddenly, without word or warning, faith was grown deep within him. He would never drink again. He would clean himself up. He would discover what there was in him that God saw and believed in. 34 years later, he would stand in the pulpit of my church to receive the Christian Business Man of the Year award from the prestigious Religious Heritage of America. By this time, he had been married to his first wife for 30 years. Every dream he ever had come true. Children's business success. He was a multi-millionaire. 3 United States president had trapped him for high government service. Now he could give something back. He became a major donor to a $6 million 250 bed facility to house and help the homeless in the same place where he had found God more than 3 decades before. The McDermott Center is named after and run by Father McDermott, the man in black standing at the lamp post 30 years before. So don't be surprised if the God who believes in you meets you, your mind, or change your mood. I never ever felt I was worthy of God. I had a horrible self-image until God touched me. Donor declares. Now that's why the next chapter is so terribly important. A self-image transplant. Go for it. Thou shalt not make any graven image. In our next video, you can listen this. Thanks for listening, watching our channel. Understand this first commandment of life written by this book. Robert H. Schuller. Believe in the God who believes in you. Thanks.